Good evening, good evening.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. So sorry last week we got snowed out, but very, very thankful you guys came today.
Yeah. Tonight, we are going to be covering the subject of conflict, how to have a good fight, the art of conflict. You guys ready for this? Let me see here. Come on, let me see. It's kind of, you guys. Listen.
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
Right. We would like to just invite you. I know we have a few new people, a few visitors. Just settle in. We're glad you're here. Participate the best you can. No obligations. Around the table at the end of the session tonight, there's some conversation that will happen. And if you're at one of those tables with a new person, invite them in and feel free to share or not. Just relax. We want you to get as much as you can out of it here tonight. So
yeah, let's. Why don't you bow your head with me? We'll just pray real quick and jump right into our content. Heavenly Father, we love you. We thank you. And we know that conflict is a normal part of the human condition, and we look to you to say, how do we do this? What does it look like? What does it mean to have a godly disagreement and conflict? And how do we do that in a loving marriage relationship? So, yeah, we submit our best ideas for your true idea. In Jesus' name, amen.
A guy by the name of Les Parrott, that's a quote out of a book, I think it's back here on the table actually, called Saving Your Marriage Before It Starts. It's kind of a premarital book. We really encourage you to read it, or we give it away a lot when we do premarital coaching. Think about what he's saying. Conflict is the price we pay to go deeper. Like Jason said, I think conflict is inevitable. We live right now in a world full of just armed conflict, male-female, race conflict, demographic conflict, political conflict. But tonight, we're going to drill down on the whole idea of conflict within a relationship between a man and a woman, particularly in the area of marriage. Conflict is the price we pay. So, I don't know about you, but maybe it's just me, but I don't grow. My wife and I don't grow through good times. No one goes on a 4-day trip to Disney World or a cruise to the Caribbean and said, gosh, my character so developed when I was on that trip. I came back with a whole new, no. But we do enjoy those trips, but that's not what they do. This sharpening, iron, Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens the countenance of a friend. This is what takes us deeper and deeper, is what you want to do, because you don't want to live at a superficial level.
So I think most of us would agree you got into marriage to go deeper. You want to take the next step. Maybe you had the conversation of where are we at? And you decided we want to go farther. So to avoid conflict is to avoid going deeper. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do conflict poorly and not go deeper from it, but if done well, it does take you to a deeper place. Listen to this quote: conflicts create the fire of affects and emotions, and like every fire, it has two aspects, that of burning and that of giving light. Think about that for a second. The conflict brings to light things that were possibly hidden before. And it does burn. It has that aspect, and we don't maybe like that part of it, but part of burning is purifying. And so to avoid it is to avoid going deeper.
So unashamedly, we are going to come at this from a biblical Christian worldview, right? Now, I realize that not everybody has that view, and that's fine. I mean, people have different ways, and good luck with that, I guess, right? But we're coming from a premise that God is the creator of the idea, male and female, and he's also the idea of bringing that male and female as two different individuals together in this thing called marriage. And what he's after, we talked about the last time we were together, he's after oneness. Physical is easy to see, but emotional and spiritual oneness. We believe biblically, and we'll show you that represents something incredible in the heart of God. So my point in saying this is that if it would make sense. Have you ever been in an argument with your spouse or somebody like that, like somebody close to you, and you just say, well, we just need a third opinion? That's generally a good thing to do, depending on who that opinion is. But in every conflict, there's my view of things, there's your view of things, and then there's God's opinion. That's what we have to find. What does God think? Because he created the idea. Honestly, I am shocked how many people claim to be followers of Jesus and they don't involve Jesus at all. They try to do something, they do some crazy thing on their own that is totally ungodly. It's otherworldly, and they run it over a cliff.
So you have to combat some myths when going into relationships, and one of the myths that we want to talk about today is everything good in this relationship should get better with time. That it would maybe even just be natural. Like, well, this has been nothing but good so far when you go in, and that's not true of everyone, but that is some people's experience. So these things are just going to get better with time. Time will just make them better. And that is not usually the case.
I just think that's the dumbest thing in the world.
I wondered what you thought about it.
Well, it's like,
It's good.
I mean, people who say, well, you know, time just heals everything. I know people that have been angry for 20 years or more. I know people that have been bitter. I know people that have been stuck going round and round the same mountain, just different characters. That's all they do is they change characters in the play, or they change locations. They change churches, they change mates, they change whatever. But they end up in the same place year after year because, my point is, time doesn't. Now, I think God can work over time, and I think over a period of time with God, he'll heal. But time in and of itself, it really is just kind of a neutral factor in a way. What we need is the creator and the author of the idea. So here's a conflict definition. Conflict, this is kind of a combination Bruce Jason Webster thing, right? But conflict is a clash between two or more people as a result of opposing differences in nature and opinion or interest. So everybody has experienced that, right? I mean,
you know what's funny about that too is you're often in that relationship because you love the differences.
Yeah.
Oh, you're just so great the way that you're good with money.
You're a vegetarian?
I've always had such a hard time with that, and you're so good with it. And then you get in the marriage like, I hate how good you are with money.
I want meat.
Let go of the money and let me have some.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really true. We're attracted oftentimes to how cute or how intriguing these differences are. But then when it actually rubs me the wrong way, when I don't get my way, boom, like Jung said, sparks fly, fire happens, right? So fire doesn't have to burn us. Fire can provide light, or it can. So what we're going to do, you have some fill-in-the-blank stuff there at your table like we did last week, I believe. Mm-hmm. And we'd love you to fill in the blank, follow along, grab a pen if you don't have one. So there's a cousin word for conflict, and that cousin word I think we have on a slide, and it's called, maybe we don't, it's called strife. So conflict is one thing. Conflict is a collision of two ideas or interests, right? I thought you said you'd help with the dishes. I thought you only wanted 3 children, and now we're going to have, you know what I'm saying? But strife is conflict at another level. Strife is this idea is to go into combat and to take up arms. So conflict is healthy, can be, not all the time, but strife is another thing.
I would maybe try to describe it like this. In strife, you want to win. In conflict, we want to win. We want a win for us, as opposed to I want to win, which makes you lose.
Yeah. You know, we've been doing this a few years, Jason and I, and we've counseled hundreds and hundreds of couples. And I can honestly say, I want to say this carefully and slowly. I've never seen conflict destroy a marriage. You know what destroys a marriage? Sin. Sin destroys a marriage. I want that to settle in. Now, sometimes conflict leads to sin, but in the end, conflict does not have to destroy a marriage. Now, I've seen plenty of marriages that have gone on the rocks but it's because conflict moved to a place of sinful, selfish, self-indulgent, stubborn behavior. So we want to just kind of walk through, okay, how does this work? So Ephesians says this. This is our scripture for tonight. I think, actually, I went the wrong direction. My bad here. Just a second. It's hard, the lights. It says in Ephesians 4, we will no longer be immature like children. Paul's talking here in the context of growing up. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of teaching. We will no longer be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. I love this passage. It's in the New Living Translation. He's talking about the church. He's encouraging the church there in Ephesus to grow up. So we're not going to be tricked with lies so clever they sound like the truth. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ, who is the head of the body, the church. Man.
Think about that, because sometimes we think truth is the enemy. You know, we're afraid to talk about this because it will cause a conflict. It'll cause a fight. So we dance around it. We don't get to the truth. But this is saying truth is not the enemy. But just having the truth isn't enough. You have to have the truth and love. Because imagine you had the truth, but here again in Ephesians in the New Living, it says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, slander, as well as all type of evil behavior. Imagine you had the truth, but you also brought it in bitterness, in rage, in anger, with harsh words, in slander. Would that be received? No, of course not. So the truth is necessary in conflict, but love has to be there as well.
So we're going to cover, first of all, what produces conflict. Not in everything, obviously we can't. And we're going to talk about styles, because everybody has a style of conflict, and if you don't think you have one, that's your style. So 5 things in a marriage that produce conflict. Number 1 is unfulfilled expectations.
Right? Come on, you guys know this one. Unfulfilled expectations. You go into a marriage with usually unvoiced expectations because you don't even know those expectations exist. That's why in premarital, a good percentage of what we do is we're just trying to draw out, hey, what do you think this is going to be like? What do you think he should do if this happens? What do you think she should do in an evening? You tell me about your family and what your dad did and what your mom. You were asking all these questions. What we're trying to get to is, what is your expectation? Because everyone goes into marriage with expectations, but most of us have unexamined ones. And it's not until they're not met that we realize it was an expectation. I expected to leave the house on time. I didn't know I expected that until it wasn't met. And I realized, I turn into a bad person when this expectation isn't met.
Or you turn into a bad person.
Yeah, it's usually the other person.
I can't believe you. You're never on time. But think about this. This is, in missions work, we talked about this a little bit, I think, a couple weeks ago. This is called culture shock, where my culture meets your culture. And I'm used to my culture. I know how to operate. I have a certain amount of security and power in my culture. And all of a sudden, wait, what are you talking about? What do you mean that we're going to just wing it? We don't wing it in my family. Well, in my family we do. And so that can produce this heat and this light. The question is, what happens when those two things collide, right? How am I going to respond? This is a great quote. It's by a guy by the name of J. Grant Howard. He wrote a book on conflict. He says, we start with the picture of the perfect partner. But the truth is we marry an imperfect person. Now we have 2 options. Tear up the picture and accept the person, or tear up the person and keep chasing the picture. Man, that's worth a picture to take home and think about that. So I have 2 options. And remember, keep in mind the context of our scripture tonight. Paul says, in all things, grow up. Grow up. You ever seen a kid just throw a tantrum because they just didn't get their way? And you're like, oh, just grow up. Right? And for a 4-year-old, that's relatively, I get it. But man, when you're 24 and you're still throwing tantrums, that is not a healthy way to do it.
Okay, so we're talking about things that cause conflict. The next one is this: unexamined lives. Unexamined lives. Now, I don't care if you got married when you were 18 or you got married when you were 48. There are parts of our own lives that we don't see because we have blind spots, right? I can't see my back. I need someone to tell me what that looks like back there, or a mirror, which is God's Word, to help me see parts of my life that I just can't naturally see. And when we get married, we realize, they see the parts of me I don't see. Or the parts of me I don't want to see, the parts of me I don't want to examine. But there they are, and they're not really letting them go. They're talking to me about them, and now I have to deal with this. And maybe even if I wanted to go into it. I expected this. I want to become holy. I want someone to challenge me. But man, I didn't think that this was going to happen. I never knew I was short-tempered until I didn't get my way. I never knew. These things we don't know about ourselves until we get into marriage.
Here's just a quick thing to imagine or think about. and we'll talk about this when we get to styles of conflict more, but how much do I really know going into a marriage how much my family of origin has shaped who I am? Honestly, most people we talk to, they're like, what? There's books on this. One is a great book. It's called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. If you haven't seen that book or read that book, highly recommend it. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. And what he does is he takes this concept of how my family of origin has shaped me, shaped the way I think, shaped the way I do money, the way I do communication, sexuality, everything I do. Now, but it's invisible. It's this invisible, like a computer program that runs in the background of my mind, and oftentimes it doesn't come to light until it crosses paths with a different program. Mm-hmm. And then there's this shock and again, smoke and light.
Can I tell you a quick secret about that? There are those of us that think, but not me, because I swore I would never be like my father, or I would never be like my mother. I have never met people more like their father and mother than those who swore they would never be like them. I don't take joy in that. I'm not making that as a joke. It's just a reality. There's something about saying that actually makes us, it might be a slightly different way, and we think we're completely different, but talk to those people that know you and see if there isn't similarities between your family of origin and yourself if you decide to make vows like that.
And I'm not saying it's a deterministic thing, like you're stuck with it.
No.
But I'm just saying that's something that should, and we call premarital coaching the best we can of turning over the rocks. Like, have you ever turned over that rock and said, what was that like? Talk about your mom, and then you start, and you go, how did that shape you? Talk about the drinking issue in your family that was never talked about. The drinking issue, the elephant in the room that everybody knew was an issue, but no one ever talked about. And how did that shape you the way you do honesty, transparency, and conflict? Listen, and it's not like some weird witch hunt. It's this honest evaluation together with Jesus to bring hidden things to the light, not to shame us, but to heal us, so that we don't pass those things on to the next generation. That's the beauty of the gospel. My wife and I both, I've shared this before, Lynn and I, neither one of us were raised in the Christian faith. So we brought tons of junk that we didn't know was junk. I thought it was like, I got it all together. And then conflict exposed our junk. And we realized if we don't deal with this, we're gonna pass this on to our kids, and we will be like he just described. That's the beauty of the gospel. The gospel gives us a new starting line. The gospel gives us a new foundation to build a house on, right? So
you want new parentage? Be born again. That's what that looks like. Third one, unskilled people. Unskilled people. It's not a sin to be unskilled, but it's a reality. All of us come in with certain strengths and certain weaknesses, and none of us get away without having some of those weaknesses. And bringing those weaknesses into a marriage, that's a vulnerable place. We've mentioned finance a couple times already. Imagine that's mine. I'm just terrible with finances. I just can't handle them. I don't know how to save. I'm impulsive. That's going to weaken the structure of my marriage. That could destroy my marriage if I don't learn that skill. If I don't decide this isn't just a quirky little character trait of mine, but this is an issue, this is a problem I have to deal with, then that can destroy us.
Think about this. Maybe some people in the room, you had a mom or a dad that sat you down and there was a transparent culture in your family, and you talked about everything. You talked about sexuality. Imagine that, right? You talked about again, communication. You talked about forgiveness. You talked about things that are critical to understand. We're not just talking about baseball averages here, things that are critical. And then somebody else comes from a family like, whoa, that word sex, never. My dad never mentioned it one time, right? And because of their culture, right? Well, you and I have this opportunity to create new culture, but sometimes it does feel like we're fumbling around because no one's an expert. How can you be an expert when you get married in your 20s? We weren't experts in anything.
Now, it's one thing to be unskilled, but the next one is unhealthy choices. To not have a skill, that's one thing, but then I recognize it, maybe I can work on it. I might not ever be the best at it, but I can get better at it. But to know something is wrong and still choose it, that's an unhealthy choice. You know it's wrong. You know this isn't the right thing to do. You decide to do it anyway because whatever, it feels good. I want to. And then you can torpedo your marriage.
You know, I sound like a broken record, but sometimes I just can't believe sometimes what people do. I just go alone in a room and just talk and mumble to myself. I'm like, I can't believe that. So
I've seen it.
He's seen it. It's just awful. Years ago, I had a situation. I'll give you a good example of what I'm talking about. Years ago, a lady who this people they don't go to this church. They never did. But it was an outside situation where a lady came and said, "Listen, my son and his girlfriend, they're living together, and they want to get married, and they're not really Christian, but they want a pastor to marry them." And I said, "Well, why? Well, because they want to get married in the faith." So you hear the background there, And so they said, "Would you just meet with them and just maybe would you consider doing their wedding?" I said, "Well," and the inside I was like, "I don't want to, but okay." Anyway, I agreed to do it. So I'll never forget. She makes the arrangement. I've never met them. They've never met me. We've never had a conversation. We meet in a coffee shop downtown. I walk in, I sit down, and it's just nothing but awkward. It's just awkward. And the guy didn't want to be there, but it was the mom who was her daughter and so on and so forth. And so we get to talking, and we're just making small talk. I'm just trying to find a way to get this thing off the ground. And so you want to get married? Yeah, I want to get married. And why do you want? Oh, because we love each other. And they're saying all the right things. But just that sense of something's off. And so she gets up to go to the bathroom. She literally gets up, and he watches her go into the bathroom. As soon as the door shuts, he turns to me and says, "All right, man, listen, I got to tell you something, and I've never told anybody this, and you can't tell her because it'll break her heart, but I want to tell you because I trust you." It's like we've been best friends, right? And he says, "And I got to get this off my chest," and I'm like, what is he going to tell me? And he says, "Listen, I have a cocaine habit." He said, "It's $100 a day it's costing me." But he said, "I'm going to kick this thing." He said, "I beat it before. I'm going to beat it again. But if she found out, it would break her heart. And you can't tell her." And right about then, he's talking a mile a minute. She comes out
Coke will do that.
and sits down. Yeah. And he just goes back to total normal. And she's like, "Okay, where were we?" And this is one of those God moments for me. I'll never forget it. Because inside I was like, "God, can I leave now? I just want to go now. God, I need a word." And I felt like God dropped this in my head. And I turned to them both. I said, "Okay, so let's just say on a 1 to 10, 1 being worthless, 10 being extremely valuable, how important is honesty in your relationship?" And without even missing a beat, she goes, "Oh, 10. 10." And she starts preaching about why 10 is so important. "I just couldn't live with somebody who wasn't honest. It would break my heart, da, 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 da." And I look at this guy and I'm like, he's going to punch me in the throat right now. And I said, "How about you?" And he goes into this baloney spin with religion in it and all this nonsense. And I'm thinking, dear Lord. But you hear what's going on inside of the head? Like, I'm going to handle this. I'm going to fix this. This is my secret, and it's not going to bleed into us. That's just not true, you guys. Whatever I bring in, sooner or later, is going to come out of the compartment. The little box I keep it in, it's going to come out in the middle of the night. It's going to come out in some area, and it's going to cause damage.
There's those big ones that are really easy to point out, like, "Oh yeah, you should not have a coke habit and not tell your wife about it." Sure, yeah,
Check.
Okay, check.
We're
no
good.
problem. Like, Bruce, you're preaching to the choir. Yeah. But how about, your work pace is hurting your family. You know it. But it feels good. You're succeeding there. You're getting a lot of rewards for the amount of work that you're doing. So I'm going to choose this over this thing I say is the most important thing in my life. I'm actually choosing work instead of that.
How about a spouse who runs up debt on a credit card but hides it from the other? Right? They run up debt and they've got a separate little account. They've got this hidden thing that they manage online. They hope no one else sees or no one finds out about. Listen, that stuff has an incredibly high rate of resurrection. Undealt with sin, when it does come out, has a high rate of resurrection. It comes out and it does so much damage.
Using sex as reward or punishment. This is an unhealthy choice. We know this, but I have control over this, and if I withhold affection, my wife gets, she gets really hurt, and it's a way to, get her back for what she did to me, or the other way around. It doesn't matter. This is an unhealthy choice. This will torpedo your marriage.
How about 1 or The other is deliberately flirts with temptation. And sometimes this comes out in all different ways, but your internet habits, even, I don't care if I said your Netflix habits, things you know, you're like, well, I don't watch porn, but I really like that series because there's a lot of skin. Like you just deliberately flirt with temptation. That's an unwise choice. That's an unhealthy thing that, again, sooner or later is going to bear fruit that is not going to be fun.
Okay, so now imagine this. You've somehow, you work through each one of these four. And you think, we're working on these, we got all this under control, but what about this last one? Because this one we don't have control of, unpredictable circumstances. By definition, we didn't know they were coming, and they're not under my control. But they can cause conflict, can't they? You know, the loss of a loved one, a diagnosis of cancer, a loss of a job. Not your fault at all, but there it is. And what are we going to do with this circumstance? Are we going to turn towards each other or away from each other? These are all things that we are going to deal with in our relationship, one way or the other. And there's more than this list of 5. But in these 5, you find what we have found, these are ones that come up over and over again when talking to couples.
Coming out of the pandemic, you try to get into a marital counselor or even some kind of relationship therapy counseling, they're months and months out. We were talking just the other day to a representative from DHS, Isaiah and I were talking. What did they say? How many calls a month? 800 or 900 calls a month. They're buried and all those calls are related to unhealthy choices in a marriage or in a family that DHS has to get involved. And imagine what doesn't come in. My point is that who saw COVID coming and what did it produce? No one really knows. I think we're still just dealing with the tip of the iceberg. So we don't know what storm is going to blow into our lives. But a sure thing is that Jesus is a refuge. The Word of God, the truth of God, the timeless truth of God is a place of refuge. It's not a place that's pain-free. Yeah. But it's kind of like we tell people sometimes in marital coaching and marital counseling, pick your pain. You know, sometimes we won't change. It said you won't change. You won't truly make changes until the pain of staying where you are is greater than the pain of going forward. Sometimes I won't move as long as I can figure a way to kind of maintain the status quo. But when that pain gets so hard and so bad that I can't do this anymore, you're actually in a really great spot because maybe now choices will be made. That's another interesting thing that we didn't mention on the second to the last one. Sometimes an unhealthy choice is as a couple, you know you need help. You know you're in trouble, but you refuse to open your life to anybody. You refuse to be transparent for fear of shame, for fear of I don't know what, but fear keeps us silent. That's why we beat the drum incessantly around here with the idea of community. Because in community, man, truth is healing you guys. In the multitude of counselors, there is wisdom. Listen, there isn't a lot of wisdom down on the bar stool at the Silver Spur. I'm sorry. And if you're just contemplating struggling with divorce and you go down there and ask people what they think, you're going to probably get some bad advice. Well, stick it out. I did. No, they didn't. So somehow there's got to be this sense of I want to know and to be known, and that's a safe place. Not a foolproof place, but it's a safe place.
And I would just say, as an aside here, there are some Christian communities that don't normalize saying I need help because you're supposed to have it together. That's not who we want to be. Could we please normalize, I'm broken, I make unhealthy choices, this unpredictable circumstance came my way, whatever. Just be willing to say, be known for who we really are. It's the only way we become actual community and actual family. So since we've said these reasons and others, it seems as if conflict is inevitable and unavoidable. That means we're all going to deal with conflict, and in that, we all have a way of doing it. Everyone does. You might have an unexamined way of doing conflict, but you do have a style of conflict. And everyone thinks their style is the best, but the reality is it's just one of the styles.
So we just gave names to these over the years. We've played with this and redone it and stuff. But we're going to just name them, give them a name, and then talk about what they look like. And as we do this, there's about 5 of them. Just ask yourself, is that me? Is that us? Is that you? Oh, you're that. And maybe ask yourself, too, where did you get it?
Yeah.
Where did you get it? No one reads a book and go, this is how I'm going to do it. No, I think, again, we're products. So here's the first one. The first one is the cowboy. The cowboy or the cowgirl, right? Everybody knows when you think of cowboys, what do you think of? You just think of
Quick draw.
and bam, 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 bam. There's just bullets flying and smoke and noise and crazy. Mm-hmm. Cowboys are usually verbal people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I heard a yeehaw.
Yeah. These guys are going to be on the panel in just a second, so I'm curious to hear what they're going to say. But we've been around those kinds of people, and they're just people that say, I'm going to tell it like it is, and I'm going to say what I mean, and I'm going to say it with passion, and bam. But the problem is after the shooting is over, there's people just bleeding, on the floor. And so you're going to see that when two different styles get together, sometimes it can be a painful thing. Now,
just to let you know, too, none of us are one of these things.
No.
We tend to be a combination of them or do the one that we think will win in the moment, but we often have a primary one. The next one is this, kind of the Arctic response. This is the choice. I'm going to be passive-aggressive. I'm going to freeze out. I'm going to give you this silent treatment. I'm going to shut down. I'm going to stonewall. My mom was this. I love my mom dearly. But my mom, if they were in a conflict, my dad wanted to talk about it. He wanted to get to the bottom of it, and she wanted to just, nope, I'm going to punish you by not talking about it. What's wrong? Nothing.
Yeah.
All right?
I'm fine.
It seems like there's something wrong. No, there's nothing.
I'm fine. What do you want to have for dinner?
Mm-hmm. I don't care. Whatever you want.
You hate me. No, I don't. So that's what happens. You get a cowboy who wants to just mix it up. Come on, let's just go to the mat on this. And the other person's like, I know you want to do that, so I'm not going to talk. You'll feel the pain. Right?
It works. It works.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that some people in general we're stimulated by words? So if I know that and I'm angry with you, well, guess what? I know how to inflict pain on you. I'll just not use any words. So it's this cold kind of response. And there's a word there, stonewalling, on your. There's an article that I want to encourage you to take, but there's an article written by a guy by the name of John Gottman. John Gottman he's been doing marriage books and marriage seminars and counseling for 50 years. He's like the guru of marriage counseling. He's up in Seattle. He's got an institute and so forth. But he wrote this article called The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And in this article, he says, listen, when these four things are chronically evident in a marriage conflict situation, he can predict with a 95% degree of accuracy whether that marriage will make it, whether it will fail or not. That's how critical. And stonewalling is one of those things. Criticism is another. It's one thing to question someone's, why did you do that? It's another thing to say, what kind of idiot would do that? Right? And so this thing of the Eskimo, this a passive-aggressive response is, or I'm not going to talk, in a situation where conversation needs to happen, he said is a very dangerous thing.
The next one is similar to it, but it is different. We call it the ostrich, and it's it's an actual. There is no problem. There is no problem.
What?
And some families, whole families, decide this is how we deal with conflict. We don't talk about it. Something terrible happens, and we just don't talk about it because that's hard. It's too hard to talk about. So we just have dinner together, and we just move on, and everyone pretends like everything's okay. That is actually conflict. Your way of doing conflict is to not do conflict, and that's doing conflict because now you're just going to live in that pain and pretend you don't hurt.
And we all know what pain does to our bodies, right? Chronic inflammation of our bodies wears our body down. Chronic inflammation of our emotions wears us down. Why would that not be true? If it's true for our bodies. And no one is above that principle, right? I'm not a doctor, but I know enough to know chronic inflammation of my body is going to wear my body down. At first, it's going to look like fatigue or sleeplessness, but sooner or later, it's going to look like unhealth or cancer or something like that, some disease. Well, chronic inflammation that's undealt with is going to wear me down, wear us down sooner or later. And we can get by for a few days. We can pretend, but sooner or later it catches up. So there's another one here. We call it the lawyer. This is the defense response. Now, we've all been around these kinds of people who they're just so good and so logical and so analytical about their defense of like, well, I know you think this, but bam, bam, bam. You ever been around that? And, you're just like, you're just left with, you win. I have no idea.
This is how I win fights. This is what I prefer. I like to seem so rational, so above it all, that you just like, oh, my wife can just give up. I give up. She loses just for having an emotion. It's just not fair. Like, I can't match you in this, and so you must be right because you're just so calm about it. And you've got this all thought out, and here's your 3 reasons. I'm just feel bad about it. Like, yeah, I win. But it's unfair, isn't it? It's not about, this is another way of I want to win. Because in a lawyer, we go till somebody wins. Either I win or you win, not we win in a lawsuit, but either I win or you win.
Yeah. This next one is what we call the doormat. This is the broken response. Mm-hmm. This response is often the result of some form of abuse that's been suffered by one or both parties in the marriage.
You wouldn't think it's a winning approach, but it actually is. Can I tell you real quick how that works? All you have to do is go, you're right, I'm wrong. I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did this again. I'm the worst. You deserve better than me. You should just leave me. I can't believe you put up with me. How does that win? Because your natural response is to go, oh, no, it's okay. You're all right. It wasn't you, it was me. I'm so sorry. I don't want you to feel bad. Because you rush in to try to help that person feel better. So if you make yourself the victim, even if you were the one, it really was your fault. But if you take all the fault to the place where you just look like a worm, then that other person is going to go, it's all right, it's okay, you're forgiven, instead of actually dealing with the issue.
Think about that, how abuse is an attack, whatever the form of abuse was. Let's just say it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, but what did it do? It destroyed your sense of worth. It destroyed your sense of honor. It stole it. Well, imagine then you take that into a relationship, and at the first conflict, someone folds and says, you know what, I'm just a mess, you're right, I'm wrong. Well, listen, no one in here wants to marry, no one married a project. You didn't want to marry a project. You wanted to marry your best friend. So when that person folds and says, I'm just a mess, like, you ever seen a beaten dog? When you just go to pet it, it just turns up and goes, all right, go ahead, eat me, just kill me. There's no sense of engagement. It just gives up. You're like, I don't know. I'd take it home, but only because I feel pity for it. There's a place for pity and there's a place for compassion, but it's not a good friendship foundation. So this last one is the oddest of them all, but unfortunately it is a style. It's the terrorist. This is the most dangerous response because it almost always involves contempt. Contempt will kill your marriage. Contempt is very different than criticism. It's criticism to the nth degree because contempt now attacks my spouse's character. Again, why did you not park the car in the garage last night and it snowed? Why did you wait to not take the trash out? Why did we run up that credit card? Those are questions that are fair and need to be. But when you put it with, you are an endless idiot. Mm-hmm. I can't believe you are so,
you always do this.
Oh, that you guys is the language of hell.
And the difference, this is very related to the cowboy, but the difference between this and the cowboy is, in the terrorist, nobody wins. I'm going to blow this whole thing up. I'm going to take this all down. And that sounds crazy. You think, well, who does that? But unfortunately, we see that fairly often. I'm going to take you, me, the kids, I don't care. We're all going down.
So we got to hurry here. Let's turn it back to what do we do? What does it mean to speak the truth in love? Empowered by grace. Obviously, as believers in Jesus, as kingdom people, forgiveness must come first. Why do we say that? Well, Jesus said, when you're praying, he said, whenever you pray, whenever you stand praying, he says, forgive. So Jesus puts that at the top of the list. If you have anything against anyone, Isn't it interesting? If you have anything against anyone, you think it would be the other way around. Wait a minute. I'm supposed to forgive people who have something against me. Isn't that interesting? But Jesus said, no, if you have anything, he said, you need to release it so that your Father who is also in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. So you want to forgive the way, Jesus is saying, the way you want to be forgiven.
Now, forgiveness, I often find whenever we preach on forgiveness, and we do it often because it's core to Christianity, I almost always end up at the end of the service talking to people who are like, I just don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do the thing you're asking me to do. What do I just say? I forgive, and that's just it? Now I've forgiven them? And I would say there are 4 things here that will help us in what does it mean to actually forgive. There are 4 promises in forgiveness. It is this: I will not dwell on this incident. And that takes hard work. Because in hurt, you can't help, but your mind goes to where the pain is, your mind goes to where the pain is. But in forgiveness, I'm saying, I'm going to take captive my thoughts, and every time my mind wants to go to the thing that you did to me, I'm going to take it back and say, no, I'm not going there. I promise to not dwell on this.
The other thing is I'm going to make a decision that this thing, whatever it is, where we've wronged one another and I've forgiven, or you've forgiven me, we're not going to allow it to stand between us any longer. We see it, this incident is our enemy, is an enemy. This incident, this thing that happened, didn't come to give us life. It came to steal life, and it almost got us. So we recognized it, we repented of it, we asked forgiveness, but we're going to unplug its power. You know what I mean? Because we all know that stuff can come up in an argument that happened years ago, and we thought, wait a minute, I thought we were good. I thought I settled that. Yeah, but it's such great ammunition. I just want to bring it back.
Here's what that looks like too. It's the next one. I will not talk to others about this. Somehow we've got the idea in our head, even as believers often, that talking this out will make me feel better. It will help the situation. I just need to go talk. I just need to go tell people about this. But in forgiveness, I'm saying, no, I'm not going to go now take this and share this mistake that you made, this failure that you had, this way that you hurt me with a bunch of other people. I've decided, and this costs something because I want to do this. This feels good to do. And so forgiveness always costs us something. And this is one of the costs of forgiveness, that now I take this story and I decide I'm not going to continue to share this anymore.
The big struggle that people have with forgiveness is they mistake it with what you're asking me to do is say it was okay. That is not what we're doing. But what we're saying is it no longer, again, like I said in the last one, it has the power to separate us. So obviously, forgiveness without repentance is not true. You know what I mean? Yeah. Reconciliation, which is what forgiveness is designed to lead to, bringing 2 warring parties together again. Because this sin, whatever I did, separated us. I confess it, I ask for forgiveness, you offer forgiveness, and we come back together. But if I'm not willing to repent of it, then it's really not in the past, it's still in the present. See what I'm saying? So, and maybe repentance has to happen because repentance is a habit, it's a good habit. And repentance is a culture in a marriage, but there's a culture of repentance. But if there is no genuine desire for repentance, then you will be destined just to go round and round and round over the same issue for years.
So that's that fourth one. I'm not going to bring this up again. I'm not going to use this in future fights. I've forgiven means it's over. Now, trust is different. Trust takes time. Trust has to be rebuilt. I can forgive someone, and if what they did is repeated and has been repeated over again, I might forgive them even every time, but that doesn't mean I'm going to continue to trust them with the same thing. Right? If I give you my wallet and you say, trust me, I'm not going to spend any of your money, and you do it 3 or 4 times, I'm not going to give you my wallet anymore, even though I forgive you for the past. But now trust has to be rebuilt.
So confrontation has a biblical order to it. In other words, when there's 2 parties that have gotten into something and their behavior has produced that conflict, I think there is a time when there is this honest discussion. And it doesn't have to always be terrible and destructive, but it does have a biblical order. For the sake of time, Matthew 18 is our text. Matthew 18 is the standard. Like Jesus said, listen, if your brother sins against you, then go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. So isn't that interesting? So if my spouse sins against me, What I'm not going to do is go tell the guys at work. I'm not going to call my friends. I'm not going to share it in a prayer time. I'm going to first talk to the other person.
Listen, on our staff, if you're a friend of mine and you would come and tell me about offense that someone has against you, this is my response. I'm really sorry that happened. I'm going to give you 24 hours. I'm going to check in with you tomorrow and see. You have to go talk to them. Don't talk to anybody else until you talk to them. And if they haven't received you, come back to me and we'll go talk to them together. But don't tell me about your offense. Go tell them about it.
And that's where Jesus said, if he listens to you, you've won a brother or you've won a spouse, right? So, and so this idea of the tough work of telling the truth to who it really matters is really our homework. But by the grace of God and with the grace of God, it produces incredible fruit, as opposed to telling the whole world except, and then it just becomes gossip. And then not only that, you contaminate a whole bunch of other people. So there has to be this acknowledging of the hurt. You have to acknowledge the hurt. So we're talking about this thing of confrontation. Hey, what you did, what you said, that really hurt me.
That looks like I don't get to say, it's okay, it was nothing. That's not true. If it hurt, it hurt. So if my wife comes and says, hey, I'm really sorry, I don't say, it's okay, it was nothing. I say, I forgive you.
You have to admit, this was my part in it. I admit my part of the offense. Hey, when that came out of your mouth, my reaction was way overboard. My reaction was demeaning. My words were hurtful, and I could see it in your face. So I own that part of it. I own that part of it. That was my fault. That's easier said than done.
And we'll often tell people, even if you feel like you're 99% right, and that means you have 1% that you were wrong. Just own that 1%. Just apologize for that 1%. Don't insist that you were 100%. Just admit, here's where I was wrong, and then let them deal with their guilt.
You know what's powerful about that is that's humbling. And you know what? God gives grace to the humble and he resists the proud. The reason I'm in the mess of conflict is because of pride in some shape or form. So when I humble myself, God's grace begins to seep in or flood the relationship. And you find that your heart softens. In this is an enemy who wants nothing more than to see our hearts go hard. He wants us to harden our hearts. And this is where stubbornness comes in. Stubbornness is not a godly quality. Stubbornness is very problematic. Teachability and softness of heart, on the other hand, usher in the grace of God.
Avoid corrupt communication. So when in communicating across the void of this hurt or this pain, don't use these words like always, you never. That's going to be unhelpful. And so check your words. It's okay to rehearse them. The prodigal son rehearsed his speech before he got home. I'm going to go home and I'm going to say this. He had it well rehearsed. And the father, before he could even finish it, forgave him, but he thought through, this is what I'm going to say.
Yeah, and this idea here of Proverbs 12, this reckless words pierce like a sword. Again, in the heat of battle or in the heat of the moment, it's so easy. Sin, a friend of Joy Dawson said, sin only leaves the body via the mouth, right? So reckless words can it's like throwing gasoline on the fire. A small conflict becomes even greater. We got to do the last couple here because we want to get to the panel. Deal with truth-telling, fast and small.
Mm-hmm. Proverbs 25:9, argue your case with your neighbor himself and do not reveal another's secret. Do it quickly. Don't wait. The longer something goes unsaid, the harder it is to talk about.
There's something we need is wisdom. Be a wise reprover. Be a wise reprover. Proverbs 25 says, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a fitting of silver. Like a gold ring is a wise reprover to a listening ear. So maybe this is where time alone with the Lord, asking God, I feel like we're in a mess here. I feel like I've part of this. I've created part of this. So God, I desperately need your wisdom.
Last one is speak redemptively. Speak redemptively. I can't say enough about how many times my wife has spoke redemptively to me and it's healed me. Just completely healed me. in times where I felt like a failure, where I failed either in the relationship or the marriage or in ministry or in something I said somewhere, and she just walks up to me and tells me, I believe in you. Yeah, you blew it. It's okay. I'm here. We're going to do this together. We're going to get through this together. I'm with you no matter what. I just feel like someone's just given me life. It changes everything. She also has the power to take all of that away, which she doesn't do. I can't believe you. Like, what were you thinking? But she chooses instead to speak redemptively, and it changes my life.
We're going to go into the panel, but I want to go in on this thought. Successful people, successful marriages, people who have grown through the years, not because they're conflict-free. Actually, they've learned to do conflict well. Here's my observation. They have developed a code. And I don't know what that code looks like. Sometimes it's verbal. Sometimes it's touch. But they developed this code that says to the other person in the midst of pain, this isn't over. I'm never going to quit on you. I still love you. I'm hurting. I'm confused. I'm angry. But this isn't the end of this. Because what happens is, if you just walk away and toss a grenade as you're going out the door, well, that person now is left with the unknown. And I don't know about you, but when I just am left to myself to fill in the blanks, I fill them in negatively. And on top of that, we have an enemy who is a liar and a thief, and he comes to steal and to kill and to destroy. So listen, if you're walking out of the room because you're angry or frustrated, I get it. But listen, you need to leave your spouse with some kind of assurance. Listen, I don't hate you. I'm hurt right now. This is the honest how I feel. But listen, this isn't over. I'm going to fight for this. And then just walk out. Yeah. And maybe that's all you got. Or maybe all you have is a touch. Mm-hmm. I'll be back.
You know us, my family, we deal in foster care. And one of the things there is a constant fear of being abandoned. Kids with constant fear. So we always have to tell, hey, Dad always comes back. This dad is always going to come back. Mom's always going to come back. It's okay. There's this fear. And sometimes we as adults, I need to hear that. I need to hear my wife say, I'm always going to come back. Right now I got to go clear my head. Or right now I just need to take a drive. But in the end of this, I'm going to be here and we're going to work this out.
Not every man is an abuser. Mm-hmm. Not every woman is a manipulator. Mm-hmm. Listen, we have got to get it out of our heads. Listen, we have to deal with the fact that our culture is spinning right now. And conflict sells. Conflict sells, man. You know, if our culture can convince you that you have an enemy, they've got something to sell you, and they've got power. We have to understand, hey, my enemy is the enemy in my soul. I have an enemy, but it's not my spouse. I have an enemy in my soul. Now, my spouse might make some bad decisions that might produce terrible fruit, but I didn't get into this because, my goal in life is to marry my enemy. No, you got into this because you love the person you got into. So,
you guys have been such attentive listeners tonight. I know we've gone a little bit longer than normal. I really appreciate it. I want to get a panel of honest people up here, so they're going to get up here and tell us all about their last fight.
Yeah. This is Marty and Becky Wilkins on your left, right here, on your far left. Yeah, look at the lights, huh? And in the middle, let's see, who we got in the middle there? Yeah, this is Ryan and Liz Bell. And then on the far end, your far right, is Kyle and Carissa Amon. And let's start with, obviously, the oldest folks here. Tell us, come on, how long you guys been married? And give us a little background, kids and so forth.
We've been married just about 40 years. It'll be 40 years on June 11th. And we have 3 sons that we have raised, and they are absolutely a joy. We're a joy all the way through, and I think that's one of the things that has brought Becky and I together the most over the years, is just that is the joy of our life, has been raising those 3 boys. And they have brought absolutely 2 delightful young ladies into our lives, our daughters, added to our family. And then we've got 2 grandchildren, Judah and Georgia, and that's good stuff.
Yeah. So. How about in the middle there? How long you been married, kids, and so forth?
My name is Liz. This is Ryan. We've been married 10 years this summer. And yeah, July 27th, 2013. We have 2 kids, a 5-year-old girl named Jovi. We have a 2-year-old boy named Jack. And then this breakfast burrito right here. A little girl due in April.
Nice. And on the far end there?
I'm Kyle, and this is Carissa Amon. We've been married for 6 years, and as far as children go, we have 1 2-year-old daughter, and the first 4 years and then the last 2 years have been a complete shift in our marriage to where we were focusing on each other, and now we have this other person that we're raising we have to focus on. So as it relates to conflict, certainly has been some new territory for us, but a great joy.
Yeah. So we'll stick with you for a minute. We'll come back this way. Kyle, Carissa, you heard us describe different styles of conflict. Did anything resonate with you guys? Like, do you have a particular style? Is it the same or is it different? What have you discovered anything?
Yeah, we were kind of talking about that a little bit. I think I've almost changed my mind beyond my initial thought, which was I think I'm a bit of maybe a little bit of the doormat mixed with the lawyer.
And I'm a lawyer cowboy, so poor Kyle.
What does that look like, Carissa? Can you give it? What does that look like in life?
It kind of depends on whose conflict it is, like who's bringing it up. If it's me, then I have a lot of words to say about it, and I really want to get my point across. If it's Kyle bringing it up, then it might be a little bit different. But I just have really strong convictions about my opinions sometimes.
So wait, I guess what I'm hearing is a direction. So if it's coming from you in his direction, it's more the assertive. I know here's what I want to talk about. And what's that feel like for you, Kyle? And what do you do? Like,
well, I think that's when I go into doormat mode. Is I say, well, I'm sorry, I'll change.
And does that work for you guys?
Yeah, it works out.
That's awesome.
There's a healthy give and take. I think sometimes just to step away, maybe even overnight, from a topic and come back when it's less heated, and we maybe both come back in a little more, a less heated frame of mind, I think has been huge for us. I think that's how we usually work things out when we're at an impasse like that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's great. How about in the middle here? We'll go back to you guys. How about the middle style? Liz and Ryan, what?
I think we revolve around all of them except for doormat and terrorist.
Okay. Yeah. So you kind of go in and out.
Yeah. I think it's changed. It's changed over, and we each gravitate. I get shocked when Liz Eskimos but I tend to be more of the Eskimo or the lawyer. But yeah. Yeah.
Liz, how about you?
Yeah, if unchecked, I'm the cowboy. It's kind of I don't know, hate to call anyone out, but the house I was raised in, it was like, let's just be honest here. Let's call it criticism, call it honesty, call it what you want. That's more how I was raised, and Ryan was raised more on the sweep it under the rug until the rug explodes kind of situation.
Is this being recorded?
Yes, go ahead.
Is this going on the internet?
Now you got my curiosity.
Why are you laughing?
I have to hear what you're going to say.
Okay, so my dad was more on the passive side.
Okay.
And my mom was more on the aggressive side.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great question. Family of origin stuff, basically, and we'll go to you guys, but Liz and Brian, do you see like family of origin, like, oh yeah, I see that in us, I see that in me, and we're trying to change it, but it still surfaces. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially when we're tired. Which is always, she says. Yeah, and after the second kid, it's like, okay, sleep is apparently optional now. It's not healthy. It's not. early in the marriage, it was like, oh, we're having this argument at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's like, why? Why are you still talking? Why are we? Sorry, that came out wrong. This is why Bruce invited me. Sorry.
It's awesome.
Why are we still talking? Not her. Sorry. Okay. I'm really sorry.
You can't script this stuff, folks. That's great. Hey, how about you guys, the veterans over here? 40 years of interaction with each other.
I'm going to plead the fifth on this. Becky, if you know her, is more of an external communicator, and I'm more of an internal. What I find out, the faster she speaks, if she's excited about something, the more I can't think of or say anything. So I like the ostrich is a really good technique. There is no conflict until I settle down enough to be really calm and then jump into lawyer mode. Neither one of those are very effective in dealing with the actual conflict at hand. And I don't know other guys out there if you get this deal where you can be in an argument for a long time.
Careful.
7 or 8 minutes times a multiplier. But it's after that. And I think we're arguing about one thing, and it's only after a long period of time, all of a sudden I go, oh, that's what the real argument is about. And it's usually at that point where humility steps in that we start resolving the argument. That part depends on me.
I was going to add to that when you talked about family of origin, the cowboy, the cowgirl hair, and the ostrich is really evident of our years growing up in our families. Mm-hmm. His family really kind of processed that way. There was just never a problem. And some things are actually healthy about that. I mean, not to just dig up everything. In my family, everything was thrown out on the table, and it was messy, and there was no healthy way of having conversation. It was not in a good way. It was very dysfunctional, actually. So we brought both of those things into our marriage, and then had to figure out, how do we grow up? How do we adapt? How do we change those things? How do we work on those things?
Was there ever a time where that thought hit you, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm my mom right now, and I'm treating this man like my son instead of my husband, and you had to kind of backtrack? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think it was really early in our marriage, and I got upset about something, and I yelled at him, and he's like, why are you yelling? And I was like, because that's what we do. I mean, I didn't know any other form, I guess. And so he really called me out on that in a really healthy way. And I had to really think about that. I had to really kind of adjust my sails, and I've had to do that throughout our marriage and stop and go, wait a minute. So yeah, it's really definitely something that I looked back on in my own family of origin and how they did things that I brought into the marriage, but also with Marty, I think, just not really wanting to necessarily talk it out. So we have an outward processor and an inward processor, and we have to work on that.
How do you manage that? I mean, what is that like? Do you just call time out? Do you just, we'll be back tomorrow? What do you do?
Well, we're 4 decades into this, so we've had a little bit of practice. Some days are easier than others, but I would say we've learned over the years to maybe pick our battles differently. Things that were really intense or difficult, or we just couldn't even, just in our own immaturity, couldn't manage things when we were early married. And just through the seasons of life, we've kind of figured some things out, and that is just maybe take it a little easy and realize that, what is it hill you want to die on? And a lot of times it really just isn't. So we've kind of backed away from those little things that got in the way.
Yeah. Back over to Kyle, Krista. 6 years, you're the youngest, so to speak, that have been married in the panel. What have you learned about your own character in regards to, have there been any aha moments like, oh, I need to grow here. I'm part of the problem.
Yeah. For me, a lot of our conflicts have revolved around how I'm using my time and the wisdom of how I'm investing the time as it relates to our family. And I think our conflicts have really shown a light to me, as far as where some of that's a little out of whack, where I'm spending time on things that I'm interested in, but that we're not interested in together. And so that's been I'm continuing to correct that, but that's been a continuous theme for me.
Yeah, and I think it never stops.
Well, most of that has come out in the last couple of years of parenting. When you're married without kids, the time is a lot more flexible. But when you add in another priority, it's just really difficult to kind of realign those things where things that weren't a problem before maybe are a problem now. So it's kind of been a new territory for us to try to navigate. And then for me, kind of in the same realm, it's been, I'm very stubborn, and I've learned that about myself recently, and it's being exposed, and I'm working on kind of being more teachable and soft in some areas where I typically would really like to stand my ground and dig my heels in that I'm right.
So when you say you're stubborn, and what is that in a conflict? How does that work for you? Is that helpful, or is that hurtful, or is that?
It's not helpful, that's for sure. It's mostly in the way that it comes out, because when I feel like I have a conviction about something, it's not for no reason. I really believe something is true or the right way to do something, and just sometimes the way that comes across as trying to come to a conclusion together isn't always the best.
Yeah. How about Ryan and Liz? Talk about that idea there. Someone feels like they're right, someone doesn't understand, feels like they're right. Is there any back and forth for power in your guys' relationship? Is there?
Okay. I got to put my foot in my mouth again. This is great.
Yeah.
We used to, and I think as far as like a power struggle is concerned, coming to this class, taking notes, doing the work, that type of thing, the skills they transition to those unhealthy choices. Mm-hmm. And it's an unhealthy choice to react in a way that demands power. And so one of the things that I do, and this goes back to the character question also, with the kids, I'm easily overwhelmed. I have these weird triggers that I never even knew, and sometimes it's just volume. And all of a sudden, everything's crashing in and around my ears, and I can't hear Liz. And all I can hear is yelling and screaming, and kids behaving in even not bad ways, even in good ways, just loud. And it's just too much. And all of a sudden, there's just a click, right? And right in that moment, there's a reaction, and it's an instant unhealthy choice to allow the emotion to add a conflict on top of what was not a conflict. And then the part that I've been working on, and I've gotten better, is capturing that reaction and apologizing immediately, because I really do mean it. This is my wife, this is my best friend, and these children deserve better than watching a dad who has a temper. But learning how to control a temper is good, but letting the temper run unchecked is not good, right? So capturing that unhealthy choice, redirecting it into, this is what is happening for me right now. This is what's happening. This is like, I'm overwhelmed here. Communicate that. Can we talk about this in like 30 seconds when the kids have something to eat?
Yeah, that's a good one. How have just your understanding, anyone can answer this, of truth and grace shaped the way you do conflict? Just your understanding, wherever you're at in your maturity or your journey, how has the understanding of God's truth and grace in my life shaped the way you treat your spouse?
I know.
You got to hold it up close to your mouth. Sorry.
There we go. Is this better, Taylor?
Yeah.
I know that with just about 40 years now being married, that over that time, and you have conflict and you have certain arguments that you go, how in the world will we ever get over this one? But you do. And then other ones come up and you get by those. And I think it's been those conflicts that we've gotten over that Becky has demonstrated the most grace to me in terms of things. I I think I'm starting to figure out, and I'm not there yet, so give me some more time, but that every argument basically comes down to not caring about how she's feeling, not caring about how she is doing at the time. And at some point, I'll figure that out, and then we'll probably still have conflict. But the other thing is, I've known this over the years, that she loves Jesus. She loves the people that I love. She loves our family more than I can possibly imagine. And I always know that in the midst of whatever we're going through or whatever conflict we may have, that at some point he will pull her back to me. And I know that I'm at least smart enough to know at some point I need to be humble. And at that point, I will also pull closer to her. And I think we're also both firstborns. All those things about family birth order and stuff. So, I mean, there are some things where we sometimes both feel that need to win. And humility is probably such a huge thing.
We're going to jump to Kyle and Chris. Understanding of truth and grace as believers, young believers, but still. How does that shape the way you treat each other?
I'll speak for Kyle on this one, but he no, in a good way. He's more of the grace between two of us. Like he hardly ever actually gets angry with me, which I probably take for granted, but he's just a really strong example of what it looks like to be in conflict and not get really angry with me, even if I deserve it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. In the middle, I finished the teaching. We finished the teaching with the idea of the code. What do you say, Liz and Ryan, to each other when it's not resolved yet and you're having to walk away? It's not fixed. But what do you say to each other, do to each other that says, you're safe with me, I'm not quitting, that leaves them with some sense of assurance?
Yeah, I think that's really important to have those. I know for me, when I'm frustrated, a lot of times, and he kind of touched on it already, our first time that we get to communicate a lot of days is after the kids are in bed, and then we're toast. Like, we're done. We're tired. There's some nights where we're like, why are we even bringing this up right now? Because we're exhausted. So a lot of times I just need to go give him a hug and like, all right, I'm going to head upstairs, take a shower and go to bed, and maybe we can address this tomorrow. But just for me, it's affection. Just like, I just need a hug, or like it's okay. Like, we'll work it out. Like, we'll get this, because it's if it's not one thing, it's another. It's a constant rolling of, I guess, conflict and resolution, and then new conflict comes and resolution. You think once you're married for 10 years, oh, yeah. I was like, well, we've reached the 10-year mark. Like, you think you have, I think I have him figured out. Like, how much more is there to learn about this guy? But it just, it keeps happening. Yeah, it's life. And he's really wonderful to be married to be honest with you. Win.
Ryan, you want
to? He said, "Don't screw it up." Thanks. So one of the things that I've been going back to, that whole the preemptive thing that I've been doing recently is just kind of like the kids are. It's mounting, and it's let's it is, because it doesn't, there's conflict just in not being on the same page. There's just not being on the same page. You're acting in conflict, like you said, Bruce. There's no such thing as an ostrich. The ostrich is a conflict style. That is not avoiding conflict. That is actively engaging in conflict. And so it's like, okay, I know we've got to talk about this thing, and you're totally right. I just can't right now, for whatever reason. And Liz is awesome at immediately picking up on it, redirecting the kids, being support in more ways than I'd ever imagine. So
yeah. Last word there, Marty and Becky. What's 40 years? You guys have got to have some tricks. Give us some inside
Yeah, I actually think we can look back over the 40 years that we've had, and I could not say this enough. I married my best friend, and he has been that all through these years. But one of the things that I think has made such a helpful difference in our relationship through the years is having community. I couldn't say it enough different ways, but just a small group or good friends. We have these friends over here, 30 years. And we're part of a group that truly cares for one another. I can't tell you how many times we sat around the fire pit and we've talked with one another and we've shared with one another and we have prayed for one another. And I think there have been times that we have stood in the gap for one another to pray for our marriages and to pray for one another. And so if you're not in a small group, if you're not in a small community, that has just been life-giving for Marty and I. It truly has. And there was a time that we thought there was an impasse, like how do we get over this? And there was a group of good friends that kind of just said, come on over, we're going to do this, small group thing. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this before, but it was a video series by a pastor who it was called Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. That's it. And we just found that we were in a group of people that also had some of the same struggles that we had. We could talk about it. We prayed about it. And there was just this great understanding. And I feel like that has been one of the things that has certainly carried us through these years, is just to have good friends and to have people praying for us and people that we could pray for, and just developing that community. Incredibly powerful. So.
Yeah, I think one of those things is, like you said, a trick, or one of those things that's like a tell that you know that it's going to be better. And one of those things is just in the midst of a conflict, and if it's a big one, it's just simply the thought of thinking back at some of those times, knowing we are going to get through this. There is something that's going to get there, and thinking about all the good times, even in the middle of the conflict. That's one of the things for me that makes it better. I think, yeah, we're maybe not doing this the right way right now, but I know it's going to be better later. I'm thinking about when we vacation together. I'm thinking about when we're over watching our grandkids. I'm thinking about all the things that we did with our kids growing up and all that. And I'm going, this deep history I have with this lady that I married is bigger than anything that we're going through right now. So we are going to make it. And I usually know that, and at that point, that's sometimes where the humility starts to come in a little bit better for me. But she'll sometimes, when I know, okay, we're getting better, is she'll have just a little taste of humor that'll come out and says, well, only one of us is perfect here, so, or something like that, or just a little bit of humor, and it's like it lets all the air out of me. It's like this big sigh. It just diffuses everything. So that may be like that little bit of a tell that says it's going to be okay.
That's great. Hey, can you give our thanks to you guys for sharing of your lives? Yeah.